Good morning to afternoon. Lunchtime, so crunch time. It's very heartening to see certain memes repeating when different speakers speak and the panelists discussing the questions, because that shows the maturity as a community that we have developed with respect to appreciation for the topics that we are talking about, as well as similarities in the experiences that people have independently had across industries. So that's a very encouraging thing. And I was particularly impressed by certain things that Jay Smith, right? Jay Smith mentioned. So let's go into the presentation. Please, next slide. So one thing that I have noticed when I consult for multiple companies and organizations, universities, etc., is that people get lost in definitions sometimes. So the first part of this journey is to get our semantics right. Slide, please. So transformation literally means a change from one form to another. So there are two ways it can happen: forced by certain external circumstances that we don't control, or we follow some industry trends, blindly aping what we think, mature companies are doing. But in those cases, it's blind. So the other is to do a guided transformation in which we actually know what we're doing. But in that case, it means, so when we talk about a guided transformation, it means that we should be able to recognize where we are today. So the from or the initial stage is something we should be able to establish unambiguously. And at the same time, we should be able to define where we are trying to go. And there are multiple ways we can approach this. Are we chasing taillights? Are we following leaders? Do we think we are behind the curve and therefore we need to catch up by following established practices? So that's something we should be able to first define. It's easy to get lost in detail otherwise. Slide, please. So this is what I frequently come across when I talk to people. They say, at the left extreme is our reality today, and that's where we wish to be because that's where some of our best competition happens to be. Slide, please. However, the outcomes cannot be defined that way. The first thing to remember is that reacting to the market is a course correction. It's never a transformation. And a lot of the time, people do course correction and try to call it transformation. But course correction is reactive in nature. Transformation outcomes should be in line with where the market is headed. There's no point reacting to where the market is today because the transformation takes significant amount of time. And by the time we complete that, we may land up in the situation where we are outdated again. So we begin another transformation. Is that how we lead our lives? So there's no point because that's a vicious circle. So how many of you recognize Alan Kay? Alan Kay, for those who come from hard software technology background, was the inventor of object orientation, Smalltalk programming language, Xerox Star, the first computer with graphical bitmapped display with a mouse and whatever, right? So he famously made a statement saying, the best way to predict future is to invent it. So there's a big difference between trying to look at where the market is today and trying to be able to stick our necks out and predict where the market is going to be tomorrow. Then meet the market there tomorrow or day after tomorrow. The farther out, the riskier the prediction is, but in the absence of that, we are only reacting to what is already emerging. And unless we can actually catch up and go beyond, there's no point calling it transformation. And in whatever I have seen, a lot of transformation efforts fail because companies fail to take this into account. Slide, please. All right, so we talk about acceleration. What do we accelerate? What do we accelerate is a question that people seem to skim over because it begins to question their fundamentals. Slide, please. So it's now we have heard all of these this morning and many more. So whenever we talk about acceleration, it means that we are making an assumption that the direction in which we are headed is correct. So as cheeky as it may sound, we don't want to accelerate if what we are doing is driving off a cliff. So determination of the direction vis-a-vis our business, our market is a very important thing. There's no point in pressing the pedal. Pressing the pedal is very easy, and running out of money is easier. And then running after Series A, Series B, Series C, we all know this game. That's not acceleration. That's not acceleration. That's suicide. Slide, please. So, if we look at what most companies have understood from transformation, this is the basic transformation. Everybody has to address at least this much. On the left side, we have people, we have processes, we have technology. And these have to be blended in a leadership drive. So there's this question that we always have to bear in mind. Who is sponsoring this transformation? Is that a manager? Is that a line of business head? Is it, I don't know, an external consultant? Or is that CXO layer? In the absence of answering that question honestly, this is designed for failure. There's a concomitant culture change that has to happen. Leadership drive alone can't achieve it unless the fundamentals of the organization's chatter in the hallways is questioned and gets reformed. So, one of the points that Jay mentioned, which I liked very much, is about the employee experience that they invested in very consciously. And he made a statement saying that their investment in employee experience yielded them as much result as their investment in customer experience. This is a point that people very often overlook. I'll return to that later. So what do we expect out of transformation? At least those three. We need to be able to innovate. We need to be able to improve operational efficiency and effectiveness. And we should be able to drive customer delight higher. So this may look a little high level, it's intentional, because I'm not talking specifically in the context of ISB or academic industry. I'm talking about what I have seen from my experience of having consulted for multiple organizations and where people start going wrong. Slide. So when we talk about acceleration, once we establish what it means in the context of our business, there are two significant paths. One is creation of a new market. We have to be clear about which route we are taking. Are we creating a new market or are we expanding an existing market? Both are completely different bets. You talk about a new market creation. Let me just take the example of Ola, Uber. The earlier best available option was radio cab. You get a phone number, you call them, and they dispatch a cab to your place. Of course, there is the very simple way of you stand on the road and hail the first available auto. Of course, that's always there. It's there today also. But you look at the cab, from radio cab where everything is opaque beyond that phone number, to having everything visible to you in your phone is true transformation. It's not just bridging the last mile. It has gone significantly beyond that because it has placed the power of being able to actually look being able to specify destination, being able to look at the fare estimates, look at estimated time to reach the destination, etc., even before you place the booking. This is not about covering the last mile. This is significantly new power that wouldn't have been possible but for three things converging. One, ubiquity of handhelds. Two, ubiquity of connectivity. And three, a very, very reliable GPS system. Take any one of them and Uber, Ola, Lyft, whatever you call them, wouldn't have been possible. This is one simple example of where a really transformative effect was delivered by digital. Look at the other side. Sorry, please go back. Go back. Go back. Yes. Correct. So let's take one example from the other side. We all know regular shop fronts, they continue to exist today. But when eBay actually created generic shop fronts that anybody could opt into and start selling online without having any physical shop front to back them, that was a revolution. Now these days I think we have gotten completely used to the way Amazon does business and probably have forgotten the breakthrough role that eBay had in actually driving the first generation of e-commerce. However, if you really look at it, that did not create a completely new market. It opened a new channel into an existing market, which is a very different thing compared to how the Ola, Uber kind of a thing created a new market. So when we talk about transformation in the context of our business, it's very important to understand which bet we are placing. Is that creation of a market or is that expansion of a market? Slide, please. So this is a very quick checklist. Are we even in transformative process? Very quick checklist. Is our company strategy redefined by digital? Or we continue to work the way we used to work or the way we have worked over the last couple of decades? Does digital have an impact on what we are doing? Are we trying to create a new market? So we just talked about it. Are our core functions digitally equipped? So different people take different approaches to this question. And I have seen some people push this question back. So saying, you know what, our core is this, our core is that. Actually, our core has no technology in that, or our core has a technology which is mostly mechanical in nature. It doesn't benefit from whatever you are calling digital, etc. It differs from business to business, industry to industry, sector to sector. But this is a question that has to be answered honestly. Same with the last. Are our enabling functions digitally equipped? Very quick checklist. Write answers to these and you will get half the answer. Right? Slide, please. So now suppose we establish what we are talking about as digital in our context and we actually want to talk transformation. Then is there some checklist similarly that we could use in order to kickstart this effort? Slide, please. So there's something that I've noticed from multiple engagements, so you can treat this as kind of a summary of what I have learned, right? And again, as I said, it was heartening to see some of these points repeated by other people this morning. So the first and foremost thing is customer obsession. If we don't redefine our customer experience to be better, then we should not use the term transformation. You know, whether it is analog transformation or digital transformation doesn't matter. We shouldn't use the term transformation at all in case we are not redefining the customer experience for the better. So this you call, you use design thinking, you do whatever you want because it's very easy to have a lot of conflicting methodologies applied to this, but redefining the customer experience for the better is absolutely important. So, the last point is something where I have had frustrated people, come and talk to me saying that I did suggest this, I did suggest exactly this, my boss didn't agree, right? So there are situations where, in which a little more fight may have to be done in order to convince the proper powers that be in order to make the right decisions, but it is very important. Slide, please. Think big. There's no substitute for this. There's absolutely no substitute for this. Think big. So prefer long-term value creation over short-term results is a very important thing, and I keep reiterating it wherever I go, because there is some urgency that people create saying that, unless you execute now, somebody else is going to overtake, you're going to lose market share, you're going to that. In all of human history, we can actually count in 2 digits the genuine number of times the time actually played such a devastating role in somebody getting crushed by competition. In fact, the opposite is what is true most of the time. That means innovators in most cases actually are not the winners later. Building a viable business model around something new is a different art. It's not a science. Nobody has actually written formulae for that. It's a completely different game. And in a lot of scenarios, we actually see that somebody invents, but somebody else actually wins in that market. And they may be slow starters. Microsoft has done it repeatedly. Apple has done it repeatedly. And if you just look at the number of patents that IBM has, for instance, right? And not to demean anybody from IBM in case there's anybody from IBM. IBM invented so much. And for the patent portfolio that they had, the amount of money that they pumped into fundamental computing research, the actual market success that they had is a tiny fraction. And then you look at people who actually licensed that technology and made rich money in the markets, they are all different people. These people didn't invent that, they weren't the first in the market. So, don't be in a great hurry to launch. It's only in exceedingly rare situations that time actually matters. Don't be in a great hurry to launch. Do iterate. Now I might sound contradictory. No. Launch early, iterate, definitely, but don't be in a great hurry to put something out that is not even 1/4 cooked. Next. Innovation. So thinking out of the box, so you remember 2 points that I mentioned, leadership, culture. This is part of culture. Leadership can't drive the company or the corporation or the entity to become innovative. There's a deeper fabric that has to be fundamentally attended to when it comes to innovation. So it's a systematic thing. It has to be done over a period of time, and it requires tenacity. Slide, please. So I was glad Jay mentioned it. I was glad somebody else also mentioned it. There's, again, no substitute for this. Hire the best, develop the best, reward the best, respect them, trust them to do the right thing. The best performing teams are self-organizing. You don't need to put a hierarchy over there. The hierarchy emerges. Leaders emerge. You designate leaders is the first thing that you can do to kill the spirit of the team. Let the leaders emerge. Encourage them, reward them, they'll deliver. Trust them, they will deliver. Slide, please. Spirit of learning. This is something which is so unfortunate. After the first success, most companies change. The fire in the belly somehow is gone. Complacency sets in. I can immediately recall at least 12 books that have been written on this, and I'm sure you can multiply it by a factor of 20. So much has been said on this subject, but people somehow overlook this. There's a marked change in the corporate character after the first success. Don't let that happen. That spirit has to continue. The hunger has to be there. The fire has to continue. This is again related to culture. So this is something which has to be really addressed. This is a slide that gets a few people very uncomfortable and a few others angry. A lot of CXO people lose touch with ground realities. They start seeing the world through the layer, the immediately reporting layer, and then lose touch with people who are on the ground, the foot soldiers. They forget to be in constant touch with the real innovators. They start having a field of distortion in front of their eyes when they do competitive analysis, or when they throw an idea out and think that it is the idea that's going to deliver the world out of all ills. There's a big feedback problem. A lot of people in the CXO layer lose touch with reality. So please don't do that. It's very important. Transformation is a very risky process. At every step of that, there is a great need to have direct feedback from people on the ground. So don't get your feedback from the layer that reports to you alone. It's very important. Finally, we all realize this. I think I already made a statement about people running after Series A, Series B, Series C, Series F, Series Z, and Series AA, etc. So the thing is, invest where there is a real need to invest. So the last point says at the same time, you cannot save your way to greatness. So don't cut the wrong corners. Please invest where you need to. But everybody has gone to cloud, so let me go to cloud. Everybody has licensed, an AI platform, so let me license one. Everybody seems to move away from RDBMS to key value stores, so let me go do that. Everybody is doing Lambda, so let me re-engineer my entire product portfolio to use Lambda functions. Is a very, very wrong way to approach it. So question every decision, be frugal, don't run out of money before you actually can cross the chasm. So be careful, but don't cut the wrong corners. So these are what I have abstracted as learnings that I have seen across multiple organizations, and this is purposefully at a high level. I have not really gone into the specifics of any industry, but these are what I have seen to be generally applicable across a lot of companies, a lot of industries. Questions? Yes, please.
Some of the people in the audience are familiar with ISB, but if you don't mind sharing a little bit about how some of these are getting applied to your organization, that'd be great.
Yes, sure. So, so I think I should first say that for its size, ISB is a pretty complex organization. So it has the equivalent complexity of what you would find in a corporate that is about 50 times its size. That's because of the multiple streams of courses which are offered at ISB and the multiple primary areas in which work happens. There are courses, there's research that happens, there are initiatives that are undertaken in collaboration with the industry, there are government collaborations. So the actual spectrum of work itself is pretty varied. And historically at ISB, each of them has had a lot of autonomy in terms of how they operate, in terms of how they make their own decisions, in terms of their profit and loss, etc. And that also has led to, circling back to our topic, each of them making independent decisions about which systems they wish to use, which systems they wish to subscribe to, and there's no standardization. So that day one is a disadvantage. So that's something that we are actively addressing at ISB. And from a culture perspective, the heterogeneity in terms of the offerings is something which also has led to optimizations that happened in local pockets in a mutually incompatible manner. So the global optimum is something that most people have lost track of. So that is another challenge. So this change in the perspective from, you know what, this works best for me, I don't want to sacrifice any of this in order to actually standardize it, because that is putting me at a disadvantage with respect to process or the amount of time it takes to process something. So that change in the mindset is something that we are again working on. So the local optimum versus the global optimum is another thing. And the third is because of multiple vendor relationships which have been there over the last couple of decades, the actual technology landscape is pretty fragmented. So that itself has to be normalized. Our data model is something which doesn't allow us currently to generate the kind of MIS that we wish to do. So these are all things that we are working on, because tangible benefits to stakeholders can be demonstrated after we make a little bit of a progress. Until then, it's a combination of please cooperate, trust us, we know what we are doing. We are causing you a little inconvenience, but this is how you're going to benefit tomorrow. So it's something. So those points are actually things that work at different planes. And it's very important to take all the stakeholders together in the journey. Yes, which is what I think I've been trying to say. Yeah. So if we look at digital learning, the onset of MOOCs and etc. fundamentally redefined this landscape a few years ago. And by making things available beyond the campus, there's a lot that has been democratized and commoditized, both, right? And it's good. So every institute of higher learning has this question to ask. What is the on-campus value that we provide that a MOOC cannot? So there is this entire concept of experiential learning. So just like in any other industry, a low barrier to entry means that you are finished. And a replicable model means you are finished. Right? So every institution has to ask this question, my friend will agree. In terms of relevance, what is it that we define as our market? How do we protect and increase our relevance in this market? And as I said, are we defining any new market? Is the other question that we'll have to look at. So digital from a learning perspective, digital from a unified student experience perspective, digital from a non-student stakeholder perspective. So there are multiple of them, like faculty, like your donors, your alumni. So each of them experiences and expects certain services from the institution. And today, the kind of opportunities that we have are enormous. Exactly the way we have a lot of difficulties, we also have new opportunities that haven't existed in the past. And there's a great opportunity for us to provide that kind of set of services to our stakeholders with a unified customer experience.
I think just to add to Srinivas's comments on digital acceleration, and this being one of the key sessions of today, right, around digital acceleration. Why did we kind of term this summit as digital acceleration? Because that's very important. I think, and Srinivas mentioned that, right, in God you trust, the rest of the people trust data. Because that is the only way we can get away from human beings' linear thinking to exponential thinking. Fundamentally, like he said, in absentia of data, he has to request business to be patient. But I think that's short-lived, because how many times business has trusted IT for last 3 decades, and how many times they have delivered on time, on budget. And that does carry forward when you ask for trust. So I see a lot of CIOs do struggle because of the business's trust deficit. And I think that's a losing battle if we continue to expect that business should trust you because you are a great leader. I think it should be data driven, because that is the only way we can do exponential innovation, because that is when you have an inflection out of the human behavior, because human being is a linear animal which only thinks 1 or 2 steps, because we always protect first what we have, because we protect our marriage, our kids, our wife, or our house, our car, and then make the next big decision. We never made a single, I don't know how many of us have made a decision where we said, I have a fantastic opportunity, I'll let go all the things I built up. And among this, I think for linear thinkers, the biggest baggage is our experience. None of us want to be a CIO and next day a developer. I don't know how many of us have been that. So I think if we were to take that as a backdrop and say, hey, the only thing that is going to help us in the acceleration is the appreciation to get away from linear to exponential, and that is powered by data, I think then we have a game to play. Thank you.
Yes. So I agree. As I mentioned, homogenization of our data model is one of our key starting points, because that's the way we can demonstrate significant value. I'm glad that I tick your criterion. I still code. Pretty much on a week-on-week basis, I still code. So yeah, it is. I think it is important. I'm not asking you all to code, but be in touch with the technologies that you use. Don't take anybody's word at face value. Question them. It is important. So it's part of what I said earlier, that a lot of CXO layer lose touch with ground. So please don't do that. Thank you.